Welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I am your host, Alec Lewis. This is episode 27, and we are recording this late. As you can probably see, it looks a little dark probably if you're watching on YouTube. Late at night on Tuesday, October 29th, recording it late so that I could fit in the news of the day, which if you were underneath a rock, probably you did not see that the Vikings acquired Cam Robinson, the left tackle from the Jacksonville Jaguars. He will fill in at Christian Darrisaw's spot at left tackle, and he's a guy who started 91 games. So a rental who will be a free agent this upcoming free agent cycle, who will fill in and should be interesting to see what he can offer. We will get into more of that in a second, but first, just want to intro it a little bit. I mean, I'll start by, as I usually do. If you're listening to this for the first time, really would appreciate you guys liking and subscribing if you're watching on YouTube. If you're on Apple or Spotify, please rate or review. That helps us out. Would really appreciate that. The other bit of housekeeping that I want to say from the top, and I mentioned this in a prior episode, but I would love a title sponsor for this thing. I really would. And I think it'd be really cool to get a local company that I could get on board with and use maybe the products, or at least, know the people involved. Because I love supporting people who do good things in local communities. So if you have an idea on that, or you have a business yourself and you have any interest in being a part of this thing, that would be awesome. You could just email me. My email is aleclewis54@gmail.com. And we'll go from there. But it would be really cool to get to do that. And so I thought I'd lob that up at the top. Could do a little presenting type of sponsor, and I think that'd be fun. It would allow me to keep focused on the day job and not go. I'm not a salesy guy. I'm not out there working the phones, working the community for dollars. I'm more of the working the locker room for information type of guy. So it would be really cool for somebody who listens to the show or cares about it or reads the stuff at The Athletic to kind of partake. And so if you've got anything, please shoot me an email. I'm on Twitter at Alec_Lewis, and I would love any idea, anything you got. I'm all ears and would love to listen to it. As I just mentioned, I write about the Vikings for The Athletic, and I do that every day. I'm at the facility every day. I talk to people inside the building every day. And love doing that. So if you've missed it over the course of these last 8 weeks, you can find a bunch of stories, features, game stories, news type information, analytical breakdowns, film stuff, all of that on a daily basis is over there. And I've got a really fun story for you Wednesday, which is when hopefully you'll be listening to this, on a guy who's really like a forefather of analytics in the NFL. And we got into his entire career. He worked multiple decades with the Vikings, and then the Packers stole him away for reasons that I think will come across throughout the story in terms of what he offered. And it was really fascinating for me to kind of learn that the Vikings were pretty close to the forefront on a lot of that stuff. So I really enjoyed getting to spend time with Mike Ayers and do that story. And I hope you guys who will take the time to read it enjoy that as well. There's a lot, I think, that contextualizes what it's like to be a part of watching these games and building a roster and all that stuff. So please check that out over at The Athletic and follow the work as we will continue to be on the grind as kind of the back half of this season starts to get underway. And this thing is moving very fast, and it's crazy. This past weekend was the mini bye. I went to, just so you guys know, because you care about my life, obviously. You want to hear what it's like to be an esteemed, just kidding. There's just nothing about that that warrants mention. But I went home to Alabama, had some college buddies come stay at the parents' house because I'm still young enough, or at least I like to think I am, to do that. And we drove over on Saturday to watch Alabama play Mizzou. It was not a close game, not in the slightest. Didn't even think Alabama played well, and they won 34-0. Missouri is my alma mater. For those who did not know that, I went to journalism school there, and I absolutely love my experience. But the football team tends to frustrate me, and the coach right now is a lot more style over substance. And if you know me, that's not, it's not my favorite type of thing, but I'll leave that there. It was fun to be at a football environment, and I was thinking a different one, obviously, than US Bank or an NFL environment. And I was thinking as I was at that game at Bryant-Denny Stadium, Saban Field, an environment I thought was like as good as I'll ever see. Like as I sat there and I thought about it, and I know this is not Alabama's pinnacle year, but I'm like, the Vikings environment stands the test with like that type of SEC environment. And I think I grew up thinking there's nothing like the SEC. And I still believe in some capacity that's going to be in my DNA probably forever, where I feel like that league and the quality of football and what that's like to be a part of it every Saturday and to talk about it every weekday. It's a special thing, but I mean, the atmosphere at US Bank and the juice in that place rivals that type of stuff. And I don't even think I'm going out on a limb and saying that. And I'm also not saying that just because I'm on a podcast talking to Vikings fans. Like, I genuinely believe that. And so it was just something going through my mind as I watched Missouri's backup quarterback throw 3 interceptions in what was a horrific display. But really fun to get some time away, and then got back to Minnesota on Tuesday. And I got to be honest, I had a weird inkling all day that something was going to happen. And part of it, I landed on Tuesday, and I was pretty tired, which, again, I don't know if you guys care, but this is a look into my life, and I like sleep. I really do. And I was thinking in the evening, it was like 5:30, and I'm like, you know what? I could hit like an hour nap. And I was having a hard time falling asleep because I'm like, if I go to sleep and something happens, I gotta be a part of it. I gotta know what's going on. I gotta reach out to people. I gotta be in the know to write about it and all this stuff. And A, that's kind of embarrassing. Just take the nap, buddy. But B, it was like a weird feeling that I had all day, and it wasn't based upon any specific intel. Now, what I will say is I did think the Vikings were going to do something over the course of the last couple of weeks. If you've listened to the show, you know that I believe that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and the way he operates, and with what the offensive coordinator, with what Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores have proved through 8 games, even though the last 7 games, the last 2 have been tough, I still believe they were warranting of the front office making a move that helps them out. And then obviously in the aftermath of Christian Darrisaw's injury, an obvious move that made sense to make was to, fortify that left tackle spot that at a level that obviously David Questenberry or Blake Brandel would not have been able to do. And so, again, I'm going to get into Cam Robinson a little more in a second, but to go back to it, so I was like, I don't know if I can go to sleep because I just have this weird feeling. And it was a good lesson. Like, at 27 years old, probably shouldn't be taking a nap anyway. I mean, it's kind of an embarrassing thing, but like, I also go back and forth. I'm a human. I like sleep. Naps are fun. Maybe I should have just, I don't know. Maybe it is more normal that I'm giving it credit for. Anyway, I took a little bit of nap. And then I went to work out. I'm trying to do something good for myself, trying to put myself in a great position to turn the page, to get ready for week 9, I believe this is, to be juiced up for Wednesday media activities. And I'm on the treadmill, and then my phone starts blowing up, and there goes the workout, and there goes the night. Obviously started writing about Cam Robinson, talking to people about the move, trying to figure out what the compensation was for the move, which we will get into. And ultimately it kind of torpedoed the night, which is totally okay. That's the job. And that's sometimes the fun of the job, is that stuff can pop up at any time, and it's on you to react and figure out the information, get up to speed as much as possible. I did have a chance to watch the Wolves-Mavs game, and I not to wade into it, but it gave me a little bit of deja vu from being at some of those playoff games last year. So yeah, that places us where we are now. And as you guys know, as I do every week on this podcast, on this show, I get into 5 thoughts that both relate to where the team is, where it's been, and where it's going to go, specifically with the mindset and a focus and a magnifying glass on the upcoming opponent. And so obviously the Vikings play the Colts on Sunday Night Football. That game was flexed, and I love night games, so I'm excited about it. But we will get into the 5 thoughts. And as I do all the time, I will give you the thought. I give you the summary. I'll ramble a little bit with some information that hopefully gives you a little better idea of how I'm thinking about this stuff. And then I will come back at the end and round it all up. But let's not waste any more time talking about napping, talking about Alabama, Missouri football, talking about working out. Let's hop right into it. Cam Robinson, the headline for me here is good move. Props to the Vikings front office for getting this done. If you missed it, like I mentioned earlier, the trade was this. The Vikings received Cam Robinson from the Jacksonville Jaguars and a 7th round pick conditionally in the 2026 draft. And they parted with a 5th round pick in the 2026 draft that has conditions to where it could become a 4th. That's kind of a lot of jargon, a lot of pick jargon. If you need the specifics, you can find that on my Twitter or on any story that you Google. I promise you will have that compensation. But again, good move. I think, like if you've read my stuff and you've listened to the podcast over the last 3 weeks, you know that the 3 positions that I really have zeroed in on, had zeroed in on prior to Christian Darrisaw's torn ACL and MCL were interior defensive line, interior of the offensive line, and cornerback. Like those 3 positions going back to when I first got here in 2022 have been serious needs. And as you've watched the last couple games, specifically on the defensive side, you can see that the lack of pass rush juice in the interior defensive line and the lack of stickiness in terms of the cornerback's coverage playing ability affects what the defense is able to do. And so I have talked about those positions. I've given names that make sense at those positions for where the Vikings are right now. But then obviously when Christian Darrisaw suffers the brutal, devastating, terrible injury that he did, and I will say, like, this is a guy that I really have enjoyed getting to know in the locker room. He has never turned down an interview request one time when I have asked him for anything. I've seen him outside the facility, and he's been nice to me, has acted like I'm just a normal guy, and you appreciate that from a guy who is as much of a star as he is. And so to see him go down in that manner with the way he was playing, with the way he goes about it, with as much as he means to this team, just tough. I mean, brutal. Like Wes Phillips, offensive coordinator on Tuesday, said it kills you. And like, obviously, you guys know you're an objective journalist. You cover this stuff, but like you root for good people. Like I always say that I root for people that are, I mean, you're around, that you watch develop, that you see how they interact. And he's one of them. And so it was a tough thing to see. And obviously when you lose a player like that, a guy who this offensive staff could essentially just guarantee that if you place Christian on an island, probably 4 out of 5%, 80% of the time, he's going to get the job done in the run game, in the pass game. He's going to move guys in the run game, which is going to allow you to be in better situations on later downs. And then in pass protection, he's going to hold up. In fact, he might do way more than hold up. He might block an interior guy and then recover on the edge like he did a couple games ago. So to lose a guy like that, when this offense is allocating blocking resources both to the interior and to the other edge, and Brian O'Neill, who's also had a phenomenal year, it affects everything. It affects the run game, which has a downstream effect that affects the pass game, because the worse you are running the ball, the longer downs and distances you are, and the more the defenses can pin their ears back and rush the passer. And so it's just a brutal loss. Like I wrote this for Tuesday, but I mean, if you really think about it, and maybe this is harsh, but I felt like it was fair. Like there have been 4 players offensively this year that you can count on consistently, reliably, every single snap. And that's Justin Jefferson, that's Aaron Jones, that's Christian Darrisaw, and that's Brian O'Neill. 4 out of the 11. Now you remove one of those 4, and now it's whittled down to 3. I feel like it's fair to say I can't rely on the interior of the offensive line. I haven't been able to rely on Jordan Addison, both from an availability standpoint, and then I didn't believe in the Lions game. He played it particularly well, so I felt like that. And then Jalen Naylor, who I felt so good about. I was on this podcast last week. One of my 5 thoughts was that I felt like he should be getting the ball more And then Sam Darnold makes an incredible climb the pocket type of play in a critical aspect of the game against the Rams on Thursday night, and Jalen Nailor drops what would have been a walk-in touchdown. So I can't include him in there either. I can't. Sam Darnold, he's played admirably. He's played the best that he has in his career. I give him a ton of credit for what he's done. I thought in that Rams game he played pretty well, to be honest. But there are still times where I don't feel like I can fully, reliably, consistently trust him. And Christian Darrisaw was one of the 4 guys. And again, so to remove that type of player, it was so tough. And so I can totally understand this front office looking at their team, realizing what they've done. Really, I mean, the fact that they are 5-2, given all the circumstances and some of the recent issues that we will talk about later in this podcast. I mean, you give credit to the job that they've all done, and to supplement, this offense with the guy who has been really consistent. I mentioned it, Cam Robinson, 91 starts in the NFL. He's been solid in PFF. He's been better as a pass protector. And I need to watch the film, but as I give you some of the advanced metrics, he's better as a pass protector than he is as a run blocker, but he can move. He has athleticism. I talked to an AFC executive who had recently kind of studied Cam Robinson in terms of upcoming free agency and said, he's an adequate starter at left tackle. And I feel like that's a fair way to describe him. He's an adequate starter. He's not just an adequate body. Like, this guy can start and can give you good production at left tackle. And as long as the Vikings can protect, they're going to be explosive in the passing game. I mean, that is, if there's been one, steady aspect of what Kevin O'Connell's offenses have been since he became the head coach, it is explosive in the passing game. When you have Justin Jefferson, that's going to be the reality. When you have Jordan Addison and Jalen Nailor and the speed and the separation ability, like, you're going to be explosive. And when you have a quarterback who can throw the ball downfield and be accurate to a degree in the way that Sam Darnold has, you're going to be explosive. And so, that has been the calling card of this offense. To lose the pass protection ability, you get close to losing that calling card, and then everything just kind of, I wrote this in some way, but it's almost like a Jenga tower where you're pulling the piece and the thing kind of topples. Because if you're running the ball efficiently, but you're not being explosive, that means you got to go 12 plays down the field over and over and over. And as we've seen with this offense, they have had a proclivity for holding penalties early in downs, for illegal formations early in downs, and for taking sacks, which makes it really, really hard to consistently string together 14-play drives. So the tagline here is, in my opinion, trading for Cam Robinson, I think it totally makes sense. It gives this offense a continuous fighting chance to be, to produce at the level it has, which has been around the middle of the NFL, around the middle of the pack. If they can cut out some of the sacks and some of the early down penalty stuff that set them behind the chains, I think this offense can be a top 10 offense. But I also say, if they can do this, if they can do that, it's just like last year. If they can limit the turnovers, at some point, the turnovers became a feature, not just like a random bug. And I've started to wonder and worry that the early down, operational stuff and the sacks taken, that's more of just what this offense is with the personnel. And so that's what I'll say. But, in terms of the picks given up, if it turns into a fourth, yeah, maybe that's tough. But if you look at hit rates for 4th round picks, you got like a 35% chance of finding a starter with the 4th round pick. So, and I also believe that depending on how Cam Robinson performs and the contract that he ends up signing in free agency this upcoming offseason, the Vikings could return a comp pick, which would kind of make it all a wash. So I think it's totally okay. And really, I think it's admirable because some teams around this time don't even call. They don't even try. They value that 5th round pick more than they value a guy who can uphold the offense. And if he gets hurt, then you look back and you're like, but that's why you're smart enough to put the conditions on the picks the way they have. So I just give him credit. I think, as I've said on this podcast, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and this front office have been willing to be creative and be aggressive when they need to. and some front offices just aren't, and I give them credit for that. So that's the first thought. Good move. The second thing I want to get to is TJ Hockenson. Like, you guys listen to this are well aware of what he provides. I mean, he caught 90 plus passes last year. He's I don't want to make him out to be, I don't know, Kellen Winslow Sr. or whoever I don't know, Robert Krause. I don't know. I don't want to make him out to be that, but I do. Like, I just hope you as fans, and I don't think you guys will, but I just don't underestimate what his return means for this offense. And maybe I'm speaking more to people nationally. I just hope and maybe it's, instead of I hope you guys don't underestimate it, maybe the better way to say it is, I think in some ways nationally it is understated just what his return is going to mean for this offense. Like, I went back and watched some film of TJ's catches from last year. And it's just, they line up 2x2 formations. So for you guys who are trying to picture this, if you're listening on podcast, you got two receivers, 2 pass catchers on one side of the formation, and 2 pass catchers on the other. And when they line him up next to Justin Jefferson, he's often defended by a linebacker. And what they do so often is they have TJ just run a route against that linebacker and pick a route. You want to run left, you want to run right. Regardless, he beats that guy like almost every single time. Those guys aren't fast enough to cover him. And then when he's lined up in 2x2 formations on the other side, away from Justin Jefferson, maybe it's the nickel corner, and he's big enough to make catches over that guy. And then when they do 3x1 formations, 3 receivers on one side, 1 on the other, they'll line him up out wide, like he's like the Z receiver, and he can run the entire route tree from that spot. So I think he will allow Sam Darnold to get the ball out quicker. I think he will open up the middle of the field. He will draw attention away from the players on the outside. It's obvious. You guys listening to this know it because you've seen him do this stuff since he got here in 2022. But I just I thought I've said this before, but with he and Blake Cashman, like, there are just some players who just, if you could do some kind of analytical number of like a guy's value over the middle of the field, I really believe defensively Blake Cashman would be really high on the charts. And I think offensively TJ Hockenson would be massively high on the offensive charts. And there are just guys who do with that space over the middle more than others. And those are 2 guys that do that. And TJ, the Vikings really haven't had, besides a couple Justin Jefferson crossing routes, besides Aaron Jones at times as a receiver, which I believe they'll continue to do because he's capable of doing it. They really haven't had, the over the middle passing presence. And with as good as this passing game has been, even without that, to think about it with it, I think he will cover for sometimes the lack of run consistency. I think I just exponentially what his presence will provide to me. Nationally, I think it's probably been understated in the total evaluation of this Vikings team. So I wanted to get that across. The third thought here, you guys, I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, then you've probably seen other suggestive videos on YouTube, or you've watched NFL Live and you've seen the Anthony Richardson stuff. And I'm not going to litigate him taking a playoff here. I'll let the talking heads and the powers that be do that. I'll give you the quick opinion that I have, as the leader of an organization in that position, regardless of shaking off a 300-pound tackler, you just can't do that. Like, I don't, it doesn't take a wizard or a football savant to know that there is a perception when you do something like that. And also, I wonder if doing something like that gives off a perception that is also kind of bubbled within that Colts locker room. But again, I'm not going to litigate all that here. I'll let the other hot take people talk about that. What I will talk about is what him being benched means for this game Sunday, because it is, to me, I mean, looking at the numbers, I was like, wow. I mean, simply put, the Colts offense, when they've had Joe Flacco at quarterback, is almost a mirror in terms on the positive end of the spectrum of what they've been when Anthony Richardson has been the quarterback on the negative end of the spectrum. Like, this is a really advanced metric, and I don't want to get bogged down with this stuff because you lose people as listeners, but EPA is this stat that analyzes down-to-down success. I'll just say that very generally, okay? And when Anthony Richardson has been the quarterback of the Colts, their EPA has been negative 0.08, and that would be like 20th and below in the NFL. Their EPA when Joe Flacco has been the quarterback is 0.08 positively. That would be top 10 in the NFL. So you're literally, and I know the sample sizes are small, and Jonathan Taylor's presence matters in some of this too, which I'll get to. But, I mean, essentially, like, the efficiency of this offense goes from bottom third in the NFL to top third in the NFL when Joe Flacco is the quarterback. And that's why you make a move like this. I mean, there are a lot of reasons, I'm sure, and maybe the tapping out is one of them, and the locker room vibes are another one. But, I mean, you have a GM that's been there for years, and a coach that probably wants to win, and an owner that wants to win for business. Now, I totally get the argument of win what? Like, what are you actually going to win? You're going to go 10-7, make the playoffs, and then what? You lose in the first round? Very fair argument, but for vibes, for approval rating for these people in their jobs, winning matters. And so I totally think that if you want to win football games, Joe Flacco gives you a better chance to do that. Now, their offense is not as explosive with Joe Flacco. The explosive percentage drops around 3%. And yards per play is more with Anthony Richardson, which is tied to the explosive. But I just think the efficiency is so overwhelmingly different from you're eliminating turnovers. You're converting downs. You're being accurate with the football. You're making throws on time and in rhythm. He gives them that stuff. And Joe Flacco also has not played this season with Jonathan Taylor. So you pair, his running ability from under center with Joe Flacco's ability to play with play action, and it becomes like I just like last week against the Rams. If you think this is not going to be a tough test, you are sorely mistaken. We'll see about Blake Cashman's availability. If he's not available, it's really not going to be an easy test. If he is, it's still not going to be. I don't think any Sunday or game in the NFL is, but specifically, I think Shane Steichen does a pretty good job. He tailors his offense a lot of times to what the skill set of the quarterback is, and so I expect them to be pretty well coached, pretty well prepared, and I do not expect it to be easy. I also think, and I imagine the Colts thought about this, Brian Flores' defense have feasted off young quarterbacks. Why? You might ask, why? Well, part of it is Brian Flores asked the quarterback to be on top of everything from a protection standpoint, and they asked the quarterback to process on the field post-snap, and young quarterbacks often struggle doing that. Whereas Joe Flacco has seen all the looks, the protection stuff. He knows how to control that stuff. He's had as much experience operating post-snap as anybody in the league right now at 39 years old. So as they think about, what gives them the best chance this weekend, to me, there's just absolutely no question. That's unfortunate that the Vikings have to play Joe Flacco, but it's also like, okay, you're going to face a pretty good test after facing two good tests. And having your defense be exposed. Can you, as a defense, rise to the level, rise to the occasion, and put those last two games behind you? We will see. I will be fascinated to watch it. I'm not going to have an easy time waiting for that game Sunday. I'm just not. That's thought 3. Thought 4, Dallas Turner. I've talked about it on the show. I've written about it in the mailbag. When I've talked about it, I have said, part of the reason he has not been the primary reason he has not been on the field more is because he has two guys in front of him that play his primary spot at edge rusher. And those two guys are Jonathan Grenard, who has one of the top 10 pressure rates in the NFL and is arguably the most prolific, and inarguably the most prolific Vikings pass rusher. And you have on the other side, Andrew Van Ginkel, who is your most versatile defender, who is necessary in terms of the way they want to play defense because of his versatility. So, when those guys are out, which they haven't been out very often, then yes, it makes sense for Dallas Turner to be in the game. But again, they haven't been out often. And then the other argument could probably be, well, why doesn't he play another spot? And to that, I would push back, or I would ask, where do you want him to play? Off-ball linebacker? He's never done it really in his life. So throwing him in an NFL game, for a team that's 5-2 that has to be on its P's and Q's because it's such an 11-person defense. Like, I don't know if that puts a guy I don't know if that's fair to put a guy who's never played off-ball linebacker in that spot. You want him to play the interior of the defensive line on third down pass rush packages? Well, what if they run it at you the way the Detroit Lions did in the red zone with Jahmyr Gibbs? That's why Jihad Ward, who is 6 foot, whatever, 280 pounds, he makes sense for that spot because he is big enough to rush against those gigantic people on the interior. And so that's what I've said. And I still really believe all that stuff. Now, there is a part of me that I see a coordinator who is as creative as possible. And so I kind of expect him to get his best players on the field. And I also watch Dallas, and I wonder, like, from a size perspective, does he need to be more physical to set the edge? But I you know how, like, there's the quote that you always hear in life. And it's like, when people tell you who they are, believe them. And with coaches, I don't think that always applies. Like, when coaches tell you stuff, I'd say I'm skeptical, and fans, you guys probably are, where it's like, I don't know if I always believe them. But in this specific situation, when Kevin O'Connell, 2 weeks in a row, he praises Dallas. He talks about how good he thinks he can be. He says he's going to be an absolute monster. And then the same for Brian Flores, a guy who, I mean, he's not one to be bubbly for the sake of being bubbly. Like, that is not Brian Flores' attitude. That's not the way he goes about it. To think he's just blowing smoke just to do it, like, I just don't believe that's how he would go about it. I just really don't. And Brian Flores on Tuesday invoked Cam Hayward, who I didn't even know had played as little as he did through the first 3 years, and obviously is now a Hall of Famer with the Steelers. Like, it's not to say Dallas Turner is going to be the greatest edge. And I understand you guys as fans, and even I fight it even myself as I'm watching Jared Verse skull chant in the backfield after sacking the quarterback. It's like, and I watch the Vikings, and they're not able to get a pass rush against the Rams, and I'm thinking, man, to have a guy who's that athletic rush the passer, like, just sitting there, it's really hard. And so I fight that myself. But I will say, and I've just been reminded this with the Richardson thing, like, this is a league that just patience does not exist. It doesn't exist internally very often, doesn't exist from ownership, doesn't exist with fans. And if the Vikings are being patient because they have good players in front of them and they need him to develop from a pass rush technique standpoint, all this stuff, like, maybe as opposed to freaking out, maybe it's like, you know what, that's admirable that they are not just throwing a guy out there just because that's what you do. And again, you guys might say, like, I'm shilling for the team here, but I've parsed the comments of these coaches specifically for years now. And I just feel like, when they truly believe and when they truly don't. And in Dallas Turner's situation, I feel like they truly believe this guy is going to be an impact player and a difference maker. And just because he hasn't played through 7 games very frequently or impacted these games very much, I just would say to hold on. And I'm going to have more on The Athletic on him later this week, so please look forward to that. I think it'll be an enjoyable read. But that's thought for it. And then last, and I'm running out of gas here because I am tired and I didn't get the nap fully, but the last thought I had was with the trade deadline next Tuesday. It seems like that's what everybody's looking forward to next week and talking about the trade deadline next Tuesday. But I part of me would just, as an outside observer, I guess part of me just wants to be like, why not add another player who fits the future timeline? Why not? Like, I have a hard time coming up with reasons why it doesn't make sense to do that, other than the other teams not being willing to trade that type of player. Like, let's just use DJ Reed for an example, okay? DJ Reed, for you guys who are uninitiated, is a cornerback for the Jets. I believe he's 27, 28 years old. He played incredibly well against the Vikings. I know the team really respects him. Like, the question would be, does Joe Douglas, the Jets GM, who really needs to win this year, or else he's probably gone, does he care to amass future picks for that organization? Like, if winning this year is the priority for him or else he doesn't have a job, why would future picks matter to him? And if he wants to win this year, you probably need DJ Reed. Now they're, I believe, 2-6, and they play Thursday night against the Texans. That's not going to be a tough game. But like that, other than that aspect of opposing teams, like the Giants, you look at Dexter Lawrence and you're like, why would we trade this guy? He's young. He's going to be great for the next 5 years. Our window might not be now, but it might be 3 years from now. We'll need him then. Other than teams not being willing to want to trade these guys, which I totally understand, even though like if you're the Titans trading Jeff Simmons, I would certainly think about it if I were them. I have a hard time coming up with stuff of why the Vikings wouldn't do it. They have the cap space to acquire a player that they could extend into the future now would eliminate any bidding war in free agency. And when a player hits the open market, the price is just going to go up because there's more demand. You could probably get a better extension deal because a player's securing more money earlier. You have the player for longer, so they impact your team more. It's just, to me, it's hard not to come up with reasons to think that the Vikings shouldn't explore all this stuff. Now, maybe, again, the other teams don't want to trade these guys. Maybe the Vikings are like, you know what? Why would we trade for Brady Christensen at guard? Brady Christensen is a versatile offensive lineman with the Panthers. Why would we trade for him? We don't love him. We think there are better options both in the draft or in free agency at interior guard. Like, then that makes sense. But to me, and I fully expect them to be exploring this stuff. It totally makes sense. And this is part of the benefit of having a quarterback on a rookie contract is you can start to creative this stuff. You can go get a Montez Sweat for what the Bears paid the Commanders for him and extend him to where you secure a really good edge rusher at that time before you have to go to free agency, because there's no guarantee in free agency that another team won't go over the top. There's no guarantee that if you want Christian Wilkins, the Raiders might be willing to pay $32 million a year for him. So that's just like my final thought is to me, as an as an outside observer, I hope the Vikings are exploring ways to add to the team for the present and future the way they did with TJ Hockenson. And I don't know why they wouldn't be, just knowing the people in there and how they think. So that's the 5 thoughts. Cam Robinson, good move. The compensation totally made sense to me. It wasn't too much. TJ Hockenson, nationally, it's probably being underestimated what he's going to do for this offense, and it comes at a really good time. Thirdly, facing Joe Flacco compared to Anthony Richardson, not ideal for this Vikings defense. And I think this Colts offense is going to be a really tough test. And if you don't believe that, to me, you're overlooking it. I don't think anybody internally in the Vikings building is overlooking it at all. 4th, Dallas Turner. When people tell you who they are, believe them. When coaches tell you something, don't always believe them, but I do believe them in the way they're talking about Dallas Turner. I don't think it's panic mode. I don't think it's Lewis Scene. I think it's a totally different situation with different context that warrants mentioning at play. And then 5, the trade deadline. I think this is a perfect opportunity to use late round draft capital, 4th or beyond, and go find a player who helps both in the now and in the future, and who eliminates you from having to win a bidding war in free agency. So those are the 5 thoughts. I hope you guys enjoyed that. It was fun for me to do. I was a little more, sometimes I do these very informally. Sometimes it's a little more off the cuff, and I planned this one out pretty detailed. So I hope you guys enjoy that. But we'll hopefully have another pod later this week. I'm going to try to get our Colts writer, James Boyd, to give you a perspective of that team and that defense specifically, because I haven't done a ton of studying on it. But that'll do it. That's episode 27 of the Alec Lewis Show. Like I mentioned earlier, a couple things. Please like and subscribe if you got this far. Really, really appreciate it. Grateful for you guys listening. I never take that for granted. B, please read the Viking stuff at The Athletic, specifically the Wednesday story on one of the forefathers of NFL analytics who started with the Vikings. If you have a local business that you think could work as a title sponsor for this podcast, if you want me to wear your apparel, if you think I wear terrible apparel and you want me to wear better apparel, I'm willing to support your brand. If you do insurance, I need help with that because I'm still way too immature in that regard. Whatever you got, I'm all ears listening. And yeah, that'll do it for the Alec Lewis Show. Stay tuned later this week for more. I appreciate, like I said, you guys listening, and we will be back. Talk soon.